unless I speak very, very fast, I'll be able to cover everything. But in case I'm not able to finish everything, then I will pick up the remaining topics probably in the next class. In fact, in the original schedule, I had given two classes for technology drivers of digital transformation. But then there were some topics which were being missed out, like business model disruption. I think that's very important to learn from. So I included that for the next class. But in case we are not able to cover this topic, which is important, I may have to. There may be some overlap in the next class. Okay, so as usual, I will start with the key success factors of digital. This is a slide basically that I prepared. Just this is only to give us a perspective. I don't. This is not a teaching slide, but just what are the critical things required in a digital transformation, and where are we basically in terms of what we have covered and what are we going to do today. So we have covered some of the topics already. Today, our focus will be on understanding the role of these various technologies, some of which we have already talked about, involved in digital transformation and how they all fit together. One thing is knowing about the technology. One thing is knowing what to do with that technology when you are, let's say, responsible for a digital transformation project. So that is what today we will be doing. Given the multidisciplinary nature of this course, because I know that there are people from different disciplines, so we are unable to go into the complexities or the details like design and development aspects of various technologies, but we will touch upon the use of these technologies. The key word here is use of these technologies for an understanding, at least at a high level, of how they how shall I say, how they collectively drive digital transformation. Okay, so I hope we are on the same page about the objective of the class today. This is an important class, by the way. And okay, now this is a very important slide. I will bring it up slowly, and I want this slide to be up for a long time so that you all have an opportunity to absorb the message from this slide. So the point here is that the app is only the tip of the digital iceberg, as you see written on the right hand side. And what we mean by that, I will just explain. So the app is the most visible part of a digital experience. For example, when we book a taxi using Uber, or book a room with Airbnb, or use Instagram for that matter, we only see the app. We don't see anything else. So a lot of people believe that a digital experience means using an app. Okay, so because this is all we see and interact with as users of a digital service. As we discussed in my last class, an app is, you remember we discussed that flow where you have to buy some merchandise. An app is just a collection of digital processes, keyword being processes, which are continually updated to keep in sync with the changing expectations of the customer. So you have to understand what's an app first. But the app is only one of the players in a digital orchestra, so to say. So app is only one of the players in the digital orchestra. And as engineers, you and I, all of us are engineers here, right? We are not laymen. We have to know something more than what the layman is knowing or is capable of. So as engineers and digital business champions, which I'm sure a lot of you would be incorrect in supposing that the app is all there is to the digital ecosystem. Okay. So now let us see the slide. Okay, let me put up the whole slide. Okay. So what this slide says is, I would like you to look carefully at this slide here. It is clear that the app is only the tip of the digital iceberg, as we say, and most of the enabling technology is beneath the visible surface. That blue is like the sea, and all things that are under the blue is invisible to the user. So that, however, does not mean that these other enabling technologies or the other pieces that we have shown are not important. In fact, they are just as important, even though invisible, in rendering a wholesome digital experience to the user. So let us take a brief look at each of these invisible participants of a digital experience. Okay, they are not visible. If you're using an app, or if a layman is using an app, he or she doesn't have any idea that there is something underneath the app, but you should know. Okay, some of this is obvious, of course, but I'll still just reiterate it for understanding. So we'll just touch upon the meaning of these, and then we will move on. We can't go into the very intricate details of all these things. Let's start with the lowest layer, communication infrastructure. So digital apps rarely work, as we know, in standalone mode. They rely on data communication network for accessing other applications and data, users, everything. As we know, there are several modes of data communication around us, and smart devices are expected to connect to all these networks to receive and transmit information or data. These networks are the carriers of information. Okay, a network is also referred as a carriers of information, and can be thought of as highways on which data traffic moves. Just think of a communication network as a highway, where instead of cars, the digital traffic is moving. So a communication network, as we have already studied in previous classes, is can be, and we'll study today also, can be wireless or wireline. While wireless allows greater cover, there are three things a network is required to do, by the way. Okay, one is coverage, one is capacity, and the third is speed. A network has to provide these three things. The network is considered a good network if it provides good coverage, it provides good capacity, and it provides a high speed. Okay, so unfortunately today we don't have a combination which provides all the three. So while wireless can provide good coverage, a wireline can provide much greater capacity and speed. Okay, you get, for example, much higher capacity and speed with an optical fiber network than you get with a cellular network. Okay, so cellular and Wi-Fi networks, for example, are, as we know, examples of wireless networks, while optical fiber is the and leased lines, for example, are examples of wireline networks. So I hope it is clear. I'm just reiterating some of the things that you already know. Next, we come to the information infrastructure. The digital ecosystem relies on information for rendering user experiences. Lots and lots of information in the form of data. The information infrastructure, what is it? Let us define it. It is the mechanism for ensuring availability of data for use by the digital processor application. Ensuring availability of data. Okay, it covers aspects like storage of data, its backup, security, extraction, transformation to make the data meaningful. So data can be stored on large, as we discussed previously also, on-premise servers, which are dedicated for the use of a single organization, or it can be migrated to the cloud with control for access by multiple users and enterprises and applications. So that is why we need an information infrastructure. Then you come to digital enablers. Digital enablers, what is a digital enabler? A digital enabler is what allows the application or app to be usable across boundaries and make it flexible. So the ecosystem of digital enablers has the web at its center, as we've discussed for all digital enterprises, has the web at its center, and around it are enabling digital technologies like cloud and analytics, as we have mentioned here, a plethora of digital tools, a lot of digital tools that are used, and most importantly, a universe of app developers, okay, who not only build new applications, but also use the APIs or the application programming interfaces provided by existing apps to build more powerful apps. So this digital enablers is, without these digital enablers, obviously you cannot have an app. Okay, so with as especially as new trends and technologies are emerging so regularly. So we have digital enablers, then we have mobile web platforms. So mobile web platforms, this is an important concept to know about. Some of you may not be able to exactly immediately relate to it, but let me just explain in one or two sentences. See, most apps are developed once. Typically, these are developed on an operating system platform like Linux. Linux is an open source operating system, and it's very popular among developers. But they are expected to run on several other platforms like Android or Windows or iOS, etc. To enable this, an app may need a different OS wrapper. I mean, for example, if you have an app, somebody may have an Apple phone, somebody may have a Android phone, somebody may have a Windows phone, but they are all able to get the same experience. That is enabled by the mobile web platform. So an app may need different OS wrappers, okay, to be able to connect with different type of the requirements of different type of operating systems. And apart from the operating systems, the web platform includes the middleware. We'll talk about the middleware later also, what we mean by that. This is part of the platform, okay, which acts as a sort of an extension to the operating system by providing additional capabilities and common services. Okay, what these common services are, we will see, but I'm sure you like authentication, security, all these are common services which every application needs. So these mobile web platforms are what provides that. Then one of the very important parts of a digital app is the user experience. In fact, customer experience management, we'll be talking about it in a subsequent class. That's one of the critical enablers of a digital experience, digital enterprise, digital app, or whatever you may say. So digital experience platforms serve to enhance the customer experience by collecting information about each customer's interactions, how, okay, user preferences, segmenting the customers in various groups, and analyzing the information to determine the customer's preferences, sentiment, etc. In various scenarios, whether he's using it for social interactions, gaming, financial interactions, etc. So what does this do? Experience platform, it helps to achieve personalized services which are in line with the user's expectations, without which the app would be meaningless in the digital world. Okay, so I'm glad that we put up this slide for a long time for you to see each of the layers separately. I'm sure each of the layers separately about, but when you connect it up all together, you get the whole sort of a stack okay, or for which the application sits on top, and which people like us, we only see the app, which is the topmost piece of this whole, shall we call it, a digital iceberg. Okay, so I'll now move on to another very, very important question. This is, I wish we had more time in this class, because this is a very important question that I'm going to cover in the next slide. And it is related to a lot of things which we have already talked about in previous classes. Okay, so okay, here's I've written that visible to the end user and invisible to the end user. Okay, now this is a very important question that we have to talk. We have talked about Moore's law. Important question that we as engineers and technologists should be asking ourselves is Moore's law enough to drive digital transformation? We have studied Moore's law. We know a little bit now about what we mean by digital transformation. But the question is Moore's law enough to drive digital transformation? Let us try to answer this question. Okay, Moore's law is no doubt important, and I'm very happy that this has been discussed at length in one of the previous classes by Dr. Mittal. So Moore's law predicted that the number of, correct me if I'm wrong, if I don't remember it exactly, but as far as I know, the number of transistors packed into a square inch of integrated circuit would double every 18 months. That is what Moore's law predicted, resulting in higher computational power by the improved computing architectures that it enables. What we are saying is that Moore's law is what enables more improved, more high speed, more sort of efficient, because you can pack more on a square inch of integrated circuit, computing architectures. Okay, the keyword here is computing architecture. So a lot of advancements in technology that we see around us are a result of Moore's law. Most important example being our own smartphone, which packs more power than a room-sized computer of the past. And this is not the end of the road. Okay, there is no doubt that miniaturization will have a profound impact on the computing architectures of the future as well. It's not just in the past Moore's law has helped. I'm quite confident that this will go on. In fact, without the strides in integrated circuit technology, there would be no foundation today. How would you build computers without Moore's law, without strides in integrated circuit technology? So I foresee that as hardware becomes compactor, that means more miniaturized, smaller, compactor, and faster, it will further drive up computational power. Okay, what is computational power? It is the ability to process complex calculations very quickly, let us say. Okay, computational power has been the locomotive of IT before digital transformation happened. Everything was measured in terms of computational power. What is the flops and flips and floating point operations per second, and those were the kind of metrics that were used to define the efficacy of a computer system. However, now the critical question is, could strides in computing power alone have led to the evolution of the digital enterprise? Would that be enough to create the digital enterprise? It was enough till now to create the IT revolution. Okay, so the big question that we must ask ourselves is, again, I'm repeating it, that could strides in computing power alone have led to the evolution of the digital enterprise? My answer, this is my answer, and which I have basing it on my experience. My answer is probably not. Okay, not undermining the importance of Moore's law. So while IT continues to surge at the same accelerated pace, it is not that the growth of IT or Moore's law has stopped, but its drivers have changed or expanded. Let's say maybe not changed so much, but expanded beyond Moore's law. Okay, let us put up the slide. Let me put up the whole slide first. Okay, so is there anything more? Okay, aside from Moore's law, the digital, okay, so let us talk about this. So these new drivers which I have shown here, the black, green, blue, and orange color, these new drivers which have culminated in the evolution of the digital enterprise define a shift from Moore's law. That means not just Moore's law and raw computational power. Raw computational power alone cannot drive digital transformation or a digital enterprise. Two other elements, which are software, okay, network, and emerging technologies, which I am using this term called next wave IT. It's a term that I have derived and I have used it in my books also. Why I'm calling it next wave IT? Basically, it covers the new digital technologies like cloud and SMAC and all the other things that we covered. But I'm not calling it SMAC, okay, because there are other areas also like artificial intelligence, IoT, blockchain, 3D printing that are coming up, which are the term SMAC does not do justice to them. So I'm using this term next wave IT arbitrarily. Don't Google it. You will not find it in Google. Okay, I'm using the term next wave IT to define the new technology wave that has been unleashed by the digital economy. Okay, so now the point is that these four drivers: communication networks, computing architecture, software, and next wave IT. I hope all of you are clear about what we mean by next wave IT. We'll talk about these things today in this class. I hope to, at least if time permits. Okay, so uh, there are developments that have happened in all of these, in all these other drivers, which are just as important for the creation of the digital enterprise as Moore's law. Okay, we will see during the course of this lecture how all of these are important, not just Moore's law. Of course, Moore's law is important. I'm again and again emphasizing. So, a digital enterprise. What before I move on from this slide, I must say the digital enterprise must achieve fine tuning across all these constituents. At least let's talk about these four. Remember these four things. They're important for a. It is evolution in all these four areas that have resulted in digital transformation or digital enterprise, not just Moore's law, or not just networks, or not just software, or not just next wave IT. Okay, so a digital enterprise must achieve fine tuning across all these constituents to become and stay successful, right? So let's start with networks. We have already covered. The good thing is that in Dr. Ravi Mittal's class, we have covered a lot about digital networks, and also I don't have to go into the depths of it, but still let us see it from a very broad perspective. We have already touched on most of the aspects of networking in previous classes, but it is important to reiterate that in the case of digital transformation, we refer to networking as a means of providing connectivity and communication for the exchange of data. Data in capitals. Data is the important term, not voice. Okay, voice would not have brought about the digital revolution. It is data. Okay, the data bandwidth therefore has a, we call it have we called it here? Okay, then I'll not. The data bandwidth therefore has a strong bearing on the speed and capacity of digital systems. So as discussed by Ravi in a previous class, bandwidth evolution follows Nielsen's law. I'm sure most of you, or I hope all of you, remember what is Nielsen's law, because Ravi explained it quite in detail in one of his classes, according to which internet bandwidth grows by 50% every year, which corresponds to doubling every 2 years. This is close to computing power growth, which is predicted by Moore's law, okay, which predicts capacity increase of about 60% every year. Now, it is easier to relate these things to our everyday experience. That's why I've written, for example, if you were to download the movie Star Wars, okay, with a 1G wireless connection in the 1980s, which we had, which was analog voice calls. I'm not going into this. You can see the slide later. Otherwise, we'll miss the timeline. Okay, it would have taken you 4 months and 27 days if you were to download the Star Wars movie on a 1G connection. With 2G, it would have taken 5 days and 13 hours. With 3G, it would have taken 4 hours and 15 minutes. Of course, with 1G and 2G, we can forget it. Nobody would have that much patience. 3G, yes, you can probably put it on in the night, and hopefully by morning, if there was no break in the connection, you might have the movie downloaded. With 4G, which we have now, it takes about 30 seconds if you have a good connection. But with 5G, it will take only 1.5 seconds. So imagine, from 4 months, 27 days to download a movie, the same movie can now be downloaded in 1.5 seconds. Now, I don't know if you calculate 4 months and 27 days into number of seconds and divide and see how many times growth it is, but I'm sure it is in millions. Okay, so it is millions, just like Moore's law predicted millions of types of growth in speed and compactness. This also predicts, which we already covered as per Nielsen's law, the high rate of speed. So even if you're now look at this way, you have a digital infrastructure, even if it is very efficient, it is meaningless if your customers, partners, and employees do not have high speed access to the internet. Okay, the it is very important. Just having a great computing architecture but having no high speed access to the internet would be meaningless. So therefore, data communication network, or HSDN also it is called, high speed data network, okay, is a vital part of digital technology evolution and adoption, not just Moore's law. Okay, so this both are important. The networks, the evolution according to Nielsen's law, and the computing architecture evolution according to Moore's law, both are important. So making the data network available, now this is very important from our perspective, to the remotest regions of the globe. Today is the biggest challenge in bridging the digital divide. In fact, I don't know how many of you know about it, but today India has only 53% of its people having access to the internet. Imagine 53% out of almost 1.4 billion people, just more than, slightly more than half of them still are now not able to access the internet. So while many reasons like literacy, poverty, and social restrictions are responsible, access to a good data network remains the biggest challenge. So it's not a small problem. Similarly, if you see on the right hand side, if you look at wireline data, the story has been quite similar. We had dial up in 1992, which gave you at best speeds of somewhere between 54 to 128 kbps. That was also the rated speed. That is what your ISP would tell you would get, but in actuality you got sometimes 10 kbps, sometimes 20 kbps. If you were lucky, maybe up to 30, 35 kbps. But even if it was 154 to 128 kbps, then we had cable internet at 3.5 mbps, then digital subscriber loop. Digital subscriber loop is basically nothing but using the existing telephone network, which is built of copper lines, copper cable, and using it to somehow transmit and receive data. So that enhanced the bandwidth to 6 to 8 mbps. Then we had optical fiber cable, then we had MPLS, multi-protocol level switching, and now we have WDM. WDM is wavelength division multiplexing, which means that it is not just on optical fiber may use light waves to transmit light, but in WDM you break up that light wave into its different wavelengths, and each of them carries the same data. So you multiply it by the number of times you can break up a single beam of light into its component frequencies. So it's a very advanced technology, but look at the speeds that you can get, 100 Gbps. Okay, so this is, so it is, and I'm sure there will be more new technologies coming up over time. So luckily, this is most of this we were familiar with through earlier classes, which were in which it was done. I'm sorry, why is it going back? Okay, now let us go to the next part of the. So we had now let's go to this slide. So we have talked about communication network. We have talked about computing architecture. Computing architecture we will talk about, of course, but we have talked about communication network, and we have talked about Moore's law. Okay, now let's go to computing architecture. Now, unlike a network, I would say this is more, how shall I say, abstract territory. It is not something which you can measure, like you can measure network speeds or things like that. It is more abstract. So we have already covered the Moore's law as the power behind the evolution of computing architectures. Right? We'll talk about it. So don't. I want all of you to understand this because this is important. We are. I mean, as I said, you are professionals. You are technologists, engineers. Okay, so you are not laymen. Okay, so if you're not a layman, you have to go into the next level of understanding. At least some of you who will specialize in some of these areas would, of course, go a lot deeper. But at least up to this level that we are talking about today, all of us are expected to know, whether you are from mechanical engineering or electrical or civil or computer science, irrespective. Okay, so we have already covered Moore's law. We just spoke about Moore's law as the power behind the evolution of computing architectures. Okay. So let us look beyond the Moore's law here to see how a powerful architecture is the heart of a digital enterprise. Now, this I'm not going to talk about because in a different form we have talked about. Basically, what it says is that how we grew from mainframe terminals all the way to virtualized and software-defined everything and cloud-enabled applications. So this is another depiction of a chart which we have earlier talked about. There's hardly anything new about it. Okay, so basically, what we are going to talk about is what I'm going to be presenting now, the computing architecture. The way I would like to define it is the foundation on which a digital enterprise is built. And that foundation is not just the hardware. Okay, there are other aspects to it, which I will just touch upon in a moment. So it consists of the hardware, of course, but it also consists of the operating system and the middleware on which the software and applications are supported. Applications and software, you can't build and run them on air, right? It needs a supporting infrastructure. That supporting infrastructure is provided by the computing architecture. So most enterprise, and this is a example that I'm giving, not example as a case study, but see the computers, like what we have shown in this slide here on the left, same integrated circuits, microprocessors, hardware, operating systems, the same are available to every enterprise. It's not different. Most enterprises use a standard set of these things: operating system, hardware, etc. So how does the architectural differentiation come about then? It comes from the design of the platforms and frameworks to support some common services. How well are you supporting some common services? How efficient is your architecture? That's what brings in the differentiation, because the chips and the operating system are the same for everybody. Okay. So these are shown here. I'll talk about this for the rest of this slide. Okay, the common services are considered a part of the technology architecture in a digital enterprise. As we refer to them as middleware. You can call them by any name, but I want to talk about some of the common services at some length today. So a well-designed architecture ensures that the enterprise remains agile, That means quick to response to change. Flexible, that means you can add or modify new services as and when the need arises. And future ready. Okay, but it should also allow seamless interplay across participating entities. Like for example, here we have shown some boxes, not all, but some of the major boxes. They should be able to interact with each other. To create a supportive architecture, the digital enterprise must establish. So how do you decide what boxes you need, or what is it, what should go where and how? So there is a set of questions which every digital enterprise, or which are part of a digital transformation planning, which everyone engaged in the digital transformation the project or exercise must be aware of. Okay, and I'm sure most of you, when you go into your work life, would be part of that workforce. So there are certain critical questions that must be asked, and the architecture has to support the, or rather answer those questions. Suppose, for example, the architecture must be, I had listed down somewhere some of the things. Okay, so it must be able to integrate external devices. That's why we have this integration module. External devices, programs, components, as well as partners and their services through standard APIs. Then it should comply with some international standards. Nobody looks at a proprietary architecture anymore. It should comply with, like, for example, TOGAF or EAI or Zachman. These are some of the common ETOM. These are some of the standard architecture frameworks. So it should comply with those international standards. The architecture must lend itself to an incremental growth strategy or scalability in line with business growth. We have covered this, but this is very important. The architecture has to be scalable. It should grow with the business. Okay, the users must be able to access the business network through maximum possible channels and devices. Today, there's no, and somebody is using a desktop, somebody is using a mobile phone, and there are other ways that, so people, everybody should be able to access it. It should also expose interfaces that allow secure connectivity. That means security. Okay, to comply with the information privacy norms. Then it should have the capability to acquire and act upon user specific data. I think this is very critical in today's most of the applications you would see provide the location also. If you're searching for something, or even if you're not searching, the location is embedded in the app. It comes from the architecture. Okay, so it should be basically the capability of the architecture to act upon user specific data, which is, for example, information or time of interaction, type of activity. These are all supported by the architecture. It should also allow service creation and easy configurability, so that you can personalize services for specific segments or customers. And finally, it should enable quick time to market by leveraging ready-made solutions. That is very important. In other words, it must support reuse, because that is, you don't want to reinvent the wheel every time. Okay, so it should be able to promote reuse. All these are architectural aspects which are provided by the computing architecture or the supporting architecture of a digital enterprise. And these are the things that we just talked about. These are the result of detailed deliberations between the business and technology functions of a digital enterprise to decide what should the architecture do, what are the future plans, what is the business roadmap, what is the technology strategy, how do they come together. All these questions are answered in the architecture planning stage. So therefore, the computing architecture, in other words, as we can see here, is a mix of distinct modules, each having a critical role to play in the delivery of digital services. One of the other important things here is that changes can be made in any module without disrupting other modules. Okay, as long as the interfaces between the modules remain the same. Let me explain this. So, for example, suppose this architecture that we have shown here, it doesn't support SMS or short messaging service but you want to add a channel of interaction like SMS. So it can be accomplished only by touching that interaction module that is on the top center. Okay, you don't have to touch other modules like information management or data modules or application security module. You just have to go into that module, make the required change, and the rest of the architecture still continues the way it is. If it was not so modular and structured, then any change would require a change in every block or module of this architecture. So that is also very important. Okay, I hope that you are able to understand this and absorb this, because these are very critical and important concepts in designing the architecture. So these modules are built on an underlying, like we see below, layer of hardware resources which are working in a virtualized environment. That is, I really don't know how to explain virtualization in a short time, but it is basically abstracting the required configuration using software-enabled virtual machines. Okay, so these virtual machines replace the hardware. So this means that available hardware resources are more efficiently utilized, as there is now a dynamic allocation of hardware. So there's no idle hardware. If the hardware is idle, you can superimpose this new CVM, as it is called, the virtual machine, okay, to run out on it, and therefore you are able to utilize the hardware more efficiently, and this achieves a lot of savings. Okay, so uh, basically this is virtualization is now the preferred mode of hardware sort of allocation than using fixed hardware. So that is also supported as part of the computing architecture. And as we discussed earlier, there were four modules, if you remember. So this architecture, if you see on the top, okay, the computing architecture interfaces with the data network, software, and next wave IT. Okay, all of it interacts with this computing architecture that constitutes the technology landscape of the digital enterprise. Okay, so basically it all sort of, if you have a digital enterprise technology mold, this is how it all fits together into that mold with the computing architecture, okay, which in turn is dependent upon Moore's law supporting the enterprise. Okay, so everything, when you talk about Moore's law and isolation, it is still interesting, but when you see how it is required and used to support the digital enterprise, then it becomes even more interesting. Okay, now we come to the third element that we spoke about in that slide, where we say what are the critical technology enablers of a digital enterprise, which is software. Okay, now like computing power and network bandwidth, software, now this is something which is not going to be difficult, as abstract as architecture, so it will be easy, hopefully. So software has also evolved considerably over the last 2 3 decades. Before the 90s, of course, none of you were around to know that, but some of us know that most of the software was developed using versions of languages like COBOL, BASIC, and Fortran. Not that there was anything wrong with these languages, but the problem was that these languages had to be adapted for proprietary operating systems. Like if I'm using a Fortran on my computer, which is an IBM mainframe, and you are using, let's say, some other mainframe, let's say from Dell or something else, it won't run. So it had to be adapted for proprietary operating systems. This is an unimaginable scenario today. Okay, since the late 90s, software has evolved greatly. Okay, not just in terms of more flexible programming languages like Java and C++, which can be ported to different environments, no problem. It doesn't care what environment it is, unlike in the past. Okay, but also in terms of new methods and processes. Like today, we have object-oriented languages and agile development processes. So all these this is the evolution that we have seen in software. So we cannot go into every aspect of the evolution of software over the last say 25 years or so, but it is easy to see that the momentum has been high in the evolution of software, and it continues to be high, right? There are new languages and new methods which are coming up every day. The term software, just a very minor difference, but something that we should again be very clear about, that the term software is used interchangeably with computer programming. So that's not really right. Okay, however, because the meaning of software extends to operating systems, information systems, user programs, tools, utilities, drivers, scripts, like compression or disk cleanup, print manager, etc., which are actually scripts. So in short, anything that is understood by a computer and can interact with it, allowing us to exploit the capabilities of that computer to perform tasks that we want, is software. It is not just programming. Even data is software. Operating system is software. Your user programs, tools, utilities, everything is software. Okay, so today, in fact, we are seeing very advanced AI based algorithms to build self-learning applications, okay, using big data, which is nothing but machine learning, to make software more cognitive. That means today the trend is to make software more human like, which is also called cognitive. Okay, so that is what is the current trend with respect to software. So while hardware has been increasingly commoditized, that means it has been made sort of standard, it is software that differentiates. Okay, for example, it is now very rare to see a specialized router, something that is only working as a router. Instead, what do we have? We have standard servers. Okay, that means standard hardware servers which are running routing software. Okay, so the hardware is the same, but somewhere it is used as an application server, somewhere it is used as a router. Okay, because the change is only the software. So as I said, it is the software that differentiates. Okay, so increasingly more and more parts of the entire technology ecosystem are becoming software defined. That is what is the key message here. So looking for a second at the picture on the left, basically it shows the evolution of software over different times in the last 25 30 years. Okay, the software, it has seen major advances in the last few years itself. Now the latest advances in software, some of you may have heard about it, include things like DevOps. okay, or microservices, data science. These are some of the things which are new or current in the evolution of software or in the field of software. Since I mentioned those, let me just say what these means. DevOps is what basically it is a set of practices that combine software development and operations and resulting in a improved time, cost, and quality of delivery. Okay, so basically operations and software used to be two different entities or functions. Now with DevOps, you use a common framework for both development and operations. Similarly, when we talk about microservices, some of you may have come across this term. It is becoming very popular with all development projects today. So basically it is a sort of a software architecture style, not computing architecture style, a software architecture style that treats an application as a collection of lightweight services. Okay, an application is not seen as a whole activity, holistic entity in itself, but it is seen as a collection of smaller applications which are known as micro applications or microservices. Okay, so the advantage is that you can take out those microservices and plug them into some other application, and instead of having to develop that service or functionality again. So microservices is another very critical development in the software area in the current times. Then we third thing was what data science we talked about. So data science, most of us already know, it is the use of basically scientific methods and algorithms to extract insights from data. Okay, so that's a separate discipline in itself. Let us suffice it to say. So one of the most critical tasks that an enterprise would undertake in its digital transformation, now let's connect this to digital transformation, is defining and implementing the software landscape of the enterprise. That is the critical thing, most critical thing. Software landscape. What software must you have? You can't have everything, you can't have nothing, you must have something. So what is that something? Okay, the software landscape is a series of changes or new implementations and upgrades, or consolidation of old software, homemade software, customized or commercial software, etc. Okay, that go in throughout the lifespan of the enterprise. It is not a one-time thing. So basically, looking at the landscape and changing it according to the requirements of the business, that is what is the need and the job of the software architect here. Okay, so the graphic here on again on the right, that is the important one. It's sort of an attempt to illustrate the major building blocks of the software landscape in a typical enterprise. As you said, software landscape is one of the most important exercises that digital enterprise has done over its lifetime. It's one of the most important exercises it does. Okay, because that is what defines its edge. Okay, so while enterprises may differ greatly, no two enterprises would have the same software landscape. But these five boxes that we have shown here, system software, software building blocks, information and data, and we have written also what each consists of. I'm not going into that. You can read that. Okay, the software, uh, these are almost always, in fact, I should not probably even say almost, it is they are always present in defining the software architecture. You cannot generically define a software architecture. You have to break it up into modules and then think within each module. Okay, so without breaking it up into these modules, the task of building the enterprise software landscape would be even more difficult. So these boxes must be designed such that they fit together sort of seamlessly and smoothly, and are also able to interact easily with the surrounding environment, which is network, computing architecture, and next wave IT. This is what makes up the technology architecture or the infrastructure of the digital enterprise. So the software interacts with all of them. Okay. What else is easily interacting with the so transforming your software and systems for digital transformation is a carefully planned and monitored process. I'm repeating myself, but it is important to say that applications and software need to be transformed in accordance with the business landscape. That is where we talked about business technology alignment. That is why it is required. Okay, because unless technology teams or the IT teams or the software teams know what is the business landscape and roadmap, they cannot align the software landscape to that roadmap. Okay, so clearly without significant evolutions that have happened in the software technology over the last 2 decades, as you can see here, okay, the digital revolution would not have occurred. So it is my view that yes, Moore's law is important, but equally networks are important, equally computing architectures enabled by Moore's law are important, and as equally or as importantly, software is important. So again, as I said, digital revolution would not have occurred without this evolution in software. Okay, and I'm not sure, this is by the way, I'm expressing it as an experience based opinion. Okay, not as a as something that is defined defined or knowledge given in some book or somewhere. Okay, but I'm sure so far I have conducted these kind of sessions in several organizations, and generally there is alignment on this, that yes, it is all of these together. So we have talked about three of them. We have talked about how networks have evolved. We have talked about how computing architecture is important and how its evolution and standardization is important, and we have talked about software. Now the last one, yeah, we have 5-10 minutes left, so we can talk about the last one, which is the next wave IT. Next wave IT we have been talking about in almost every next wave IT. I hope you remember, I in the beginning of this class, I had introduced the term next wave IT, about what we mean. Next wave IT for the current, it means SMAC, which is social media, mobility, analytics, and cloud computing. SMAC, which we had talked about earlier, but I'm not using the term SMAC here, but using the term next wave IT so that it encompasses future technologies also. I'm sure that there will be other technologies which will become just as important as SMAC in future. So just to have a wider canvas, I'm using the term next wave IT. So we are already familiar with, now this will take some time. I'll try to take about 5 minutes, 6 minutes to talk about this. Some of this we know already, but so bear with me if I'm repeating. Okay, so we are familiar with social, mobile, analytics, and cloud, or SMAC as we know it. Okay, but the field is emerging so fast that, as I said, there will be many new technologies. I would have liked you to answer what new technologies you believe would form part of this next wave IT ecosystem. But we all know of some of them, like IoT, I'm sure you will all agree, or 3D printing, artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. These would all be part of the next wave IT ecosystem. So much of our current discussion may still focus on SMAC. So for the rest of this discussion today, let us, when we talk, say, next wave IT, just think SMAC. Okay, it is currently, it is only SMAC. But it is important to be, though, it's important to be mindful that the digital ecosystem is an expanding one. So every digital enterprise envisages a new way of leveraging these technologies to suit its business model. We'll talk about business models in the next class. Okay, but irrespective of the type, size, and category of the digital enterprise, next wave IT is critical to its success. I have never come across a digital enterprise which does not use next wave IT. That means it does not use cloud or analytics or mobility or social media and still calls itself a digital enterprise. I don't think any exists. So therefore, this is very central to a digital enterprise. Okay, so every enterprise may use these things differently, but there are certain, that's why I've written these four things here. There are certain, uh, how shall I say, maybe we can say primary reasons behind enterprises embracing SMAC for business, which are common to all enterprises. For example, the first is connectivity. Okay, connectivity is the ease of networking among the participants of the digital ecosystem. The second is collaboration, or the ability to come to a common platform for transacting business and sharing experiences. We all have done that. The third is freedom, that is not being dependent on a specific device or platform or network or location for engaging in a business activity. I must have the freedom to, wherever I am, whatever I have in my hand, I should be able to use it for conducting business. And the fourth, of course, very importantly, is empowerment, or the ready and direct access to relevant information and data by those who need it when they need it. Okay, that is important. So these are the four primary reasons that digital enterprises use SMAC. But underlying these advantages, the enormous convenience, which is not mentioned here, but that is also one of the advantages that SMAC offers to the participants of the enterprise ecosystem through a simple, I mean, look at how simple it has become to use, to do business with these next wave IT coming in. Okay, and it has given us simple, new, and exciting ways of doing business. So let us look at the meaning of each of these things. We know most of it. I'm just reiterating. Let's talk about social. See, social is in the human DNA. Let's disassociate it from technology. It is in the human DNA. We are social animals, as we call it. Okay, at no point in history have social traits shown a declining trend in among humans, and this is not likely in the future as well. So, and but with technology making things more expedient than ever, social is becoming even a more important factor in our lives, because it is about engaging people in something they care about, and digital businesses have leveraged this sort of human trait of social interactions very brilliantly, I would say, to expand their reach. Businesses are now using social as an indispensable source of data, or insightful data on customer behavior and sentiment. Okay, if you're dissatisfied, suppose you buy an AquaGuard RO. and you are dissatisfied with it, you put it on social media or Twitter and see in a second how many people would come to know. Okay, so basically it is a
गलत लेक्चर में आ गया मैं.
please mute yourself. Behavior. So where was I? So
Hello, sir, you are muted.
okay, I hope I'm audible now. All right. So I think I may have said something which have been missed, but basically I was talking about using social media as a indispensable source for sharing customer sentiments and gauging sentiments, and basically enabling companies to change their service or design based on the marketing and customer inputs. That is what social media has been leveraged in business for. But what is the technology behind social media? Okay, because this is a lecture on technology. So the technology layers that we talked about in reference to digital apps in the first slide, if you remember, they are all relevant for social media, or put them all together and you get a social media ecosystem. Okay, they are all relevant, but by coming together, they create social media. So there is no new technology involved in social media, just the old technologies that we talked about in reference to an app. They are all relevant for social media. Next, we come to mobility or mobile. So we as human beings, we are a people on the go. We are people who are very fond of migration, movement rather. Okay, with the proliferation or growth of mobile devices and wide availability of wireless networks, we are no longer subject to the restrictions of location. Okay, I can be anywhere, but I should be able to connect to my business or any business that I need to. So as we said, mobility is not just about movement; it is about freedom. With more mobile devices than people in the world, and with every three, I think it is more than three now, but even three out of every five of those devices having smart capabilities, businesses must necessarily sort of transform themselves to enable this freedom for their customers. I'm sure you'll all agree. So what are this we already know, but what are the technologies driving mobility? Here again, the technology layers that we talked about in reference to the digital apps are all relevant for mobility. There is no new technology. However, in addition to those technology, mobility relies on a centralized server-based system called an MDM, or a mobile device manager, which facilitates certain services like authentication, configuration, setup, and downloads of applications and upgrades over the air. Okay, so that basically the combination of those two gives you mobility. Third important thing, we are coming to the end now, is the analytics. We talked about the data revolution in earlier class. Dr. Ravi Mittal also spoke about that in one of the recent classes. So there are startling statistics, as we saw, on the speed, size, and types of data that we are generating and consuming each day on social media and mobile platforms. Now, this data is now recognized as an indisputable business asset, and our ability to analyze this big data, irrespective of its remember the three V's, irrespective of its volume, velocity, and variety. Okay, and get or garner deep insights into customer sentiment, customer preferences, behaviors, decides our survival chances in the digital economy. So basically, in short, our ability to analyze huge volumes of data coming in at high speed determine our chances of survival as a digital company. Now, what are the technologies that are driving analytics? Aside from the technology layers that we have already talked about, okay, analytics relies on the ability to process big data at high speeds. Now, how does that happen? Some technologies like the Hadoop, I'm sure some of you may have come across the term. Some technologies like Hadoop allow for distributed processing. Okay, I wish we could talk more about this, but let's suffice it to say distributed. In fact, I remember I gave an example also of distributed processing in one of the earlier classes. Okay, distributed processing across multiple nodes or computers, and that is at the heart of big data analytics. Okay, the being ability, your ability using tools like Hadoop to process huge amounts of data in short span of time, and you do that typically by through distributed computing. Analytics also relies on structured data storage like data warehouse, data lakes, and the ability to mine data for business intelligence using advanced tools. So these are the different technologies: advanced tools, business intelligence tools, the advanced analytics tools, and business intelligence tools, data warehousing tools, Hadoop for distributed processing. These are some of the technologies, apart from the ones we spoke about earlier, that go into giving you an analytics technology platform. Finally, just a quick word on the cloud. So again, we have spoken about this. So cloud, from the point of view of consumers, cloud implies that all the heavy lifting, that is running complex programs and storing huge volumes of data, is no longer the burden of the device. I mean, look at it this way. $100 or a 6,000, 7,000 rupee smartphone can now run almost any program in the world, because it's not the program, the device that is running it. It is being run on the cloud. Okay, and it can access unlimited content. It doesn't matter what is its memory, because it is accessing the data from the cloud. So that is what has happened, and you can switch to any other device at any time and still get the same experience. So, and for the enterprise, for the digital enterprise, the cloud means avoidance of substantial investments. We spoke about it in the cloud class earlier. In premise-based equipment and technology, it means freedom from maintenance and the ability to offer quick setup times for the business, because business is no longer responsible, somebody else is doing it for you. Now, what are the technologies driving cloud computing? We know this, but cloud computing relies on a robust network. Of course, we know that, because you need a network to connect to a remote server, and storage infrastructure, of course, for data, and a scalable computing architecture. Scalable computing architecture is required for the cloud computing environment also. And of course, it requires apps which are hosted on the cloud to render a seamless experience to user. But most importantly, the cloud utilizes virtualization. Okay, to provide users what is virtualization here? Because the cloud is providing to the users a local experience while connected to remote devices. So you don't care where, because you are actually in a virtual environment. You are not having with you the applications and data that you're using. It's only a virtual instance of that. So basically, the cloud uses that, in that sense, of the virtual technology of virtualization, okay, to become an enabler of digital ecosystem. So I think we are out of time now. So the real breakthrough, but just the last sentence, I would say that the real breakthrough of all these technologies that we talked about happens from their coming together as intersecting elements. When they intersect with each other, we spoke about it earlier also, that enables enterprises to maximize their impact. And that's where also innovation comes in, because you have to use innovation to see how you can create more impactful services through these intersections. Okay, so I think we are exactly out of time now. So thank you very much. We'll talk more. If you have any questions, feel free to come back to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashish.
Thank you, sir.
And folks, I would like to have extra class because we have missed 2 classes. So please let me know. Any one of you can, Bhavam, you can let me know what is prepared time to take extra class.
I think so. Tomorrow you can take the extra class. Tomorrow, Monday schedule is following
Oh, we are following Monday's schedule? Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
at the same
All
time.
right.
And sir,
Okay.
how long the duration of exam will be?
So 1 hour.
1 hour. Okay.
All right, okay, thank you.
Will be
Thank you.
till Monday.
Pardon?
The syllabus of mid semester will be till Monday.
Yeah, till what will take tomorrow.
I have put the semester, the questions that I set was on the first 3 lectures of mine. I had already set the assignment, so I have not repeated that. Just if you can bear with me for a second, I'll just tell you. Business technology alignment, which was lecture number 4, digital culture and mindset, and digital strategy and process. My questions for this test that we are going to have are based only on these 3. They are not based on today's class and any subsequent classes before the test. We can do this assignment subsequently.
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye. Ashish, you're there?